All right, we are going to move on to this next panel, shipping change inside the DoD. Matt and team, you guys can start making your way up here and get set up. So, Matt Spence is the Managing Director and Global Head of Venture Capital Banking at Barclays. That's an amazingly long title. Good work, Matt. And today, with joining him on the panel, we've got Aaron Weis, the Managing Director at Google Public Sector, Ivan Zhang, co-founder at Cohere, and Bill Pessin, the Senior VP in National Security, Defense, and Aerospace, GovSI at Salesforce. Another excellent long title. So give it up for this panel, and look forward to the discussion.
Great. Thank you. Well, Sam, thank you so much for the introduction, and thanks to Sam, Tyler, Peter, for bringing us all together. It's the rare group of people who can get such a great group here, and as I've said a bunch of time, for all the talk and interest in defense technology, a company that's the business model that what Second Front is doing, the convening power, is pretty awesome. So thanks for inviting us here. It's really a privilege to be with this group. What we're going to spend the next 40 minutes talking about is really the key piece what this conference is about. What do we do about bringing some of the innovations into the Defense Department and more broadly to help the warfighter? I've been thinking about this myself for some time. Like a lot of folks on the panel, I've lived in the Pentagon world and now in the venture capital and the investment banking side. So when I was a DASD at the Pentagon, we were still using Windows 95 despite our best efforts. You know, high tech meant basically getting your BlackBerry scanned when you went to allied and other countries for intelligence reasons. And we did not understand how to move where we were going. Now where I sit as an investment banker at Barclays, leading a team that looks at defense and dual use technology, we're very laser focused on how do you bring great capital to help these companies scale. So when you think about dual use and defense technology, it is the best and most high performing and high returning piece out there. And for that question, I'm really thrilled to have an amazing group of panelists who are right at the intersection of that. We have Bill Pessin, who is the Senior Vice President, General Manager for Salesforce National Security, helping to reshape a lot of enterprise sales solutions for the government. Bill has 25 years of experience between the public sector, aerospace, and this, is a U.S. Army veteran, and also his experience stems from SAP and Oracle. We have Aaron Weis, who's a Managing Director at Google Public Sector, the former CIO of the Navy. And we have Ivan Zhang, who's the co-founder of Cohere, one of the hottest AI companies right now. We're on the record, want this to be sort of spicy and interesting, and we'll dig in. So guys, we're here talking about how do you bring the best technology in the service of the warfighter. We've all talked about the challenges, we've all talked about the need, but from where you guys sit, what are the current barriers in front of bringing this technology in? And more importantly, what is improved and what are some of the big pieces of work that still need to be done? Aaron, can I turn to you first?
Yeah, great, thanks. I mean, when you ask what are the barriers, and I think, you know, to my experience on the inside, trying to get these things implemented, and now on the outside, there is just so much friction. I mean, we used to use the phrase, you know, it might only take a year to do the development and deployment, but end to end from the time a need is identified until it's ATO'd and in the field in the hands of a warfighter, that is like 6 or 7 years when you go through requirements processes and the POM process and specification and then the acquisition process and then finally the ATO process, which could take another 18 to 24 months. So the friction is everywhere. And you know, it's hard to say, hey, there's one idea that I have, right? I think we have to take a systemic relook at all of that friction and think about it. And it dovetails really well with your perspective on dual use, because so much of that friction is additive. It's technology that's already being used in the commercial world successfully. So how can the government make better use of that on a shorter time frame and leverage that?
So that's it. I mean, 6 to 7 years in commercial software, that's not just friction, that's going out of business. I mean, on the investing side, if I was investing in a company that it takes that much to go in, I'm investing in another company. So Bill, at Salesforce, obviously Salesforce is driving some of the most successful software on the planet right now. How do you deal with that friction, and how have you seen that as a barrier to Salesforce going in that, and what, if anything, has gotten better since you started trying to get into this market?
Yeah, thank you. As we started our journey in the defense, Department of Defense, and then in the intelligence community, we ran right up against, Aaron, what you were just talking about, and what Google's experiencing and going through and working through right now as well. I think the number one thing is that the commercial company needs to have that maniacal focus and commitment and drive to see it through. It is a long journey. It's not easy. And it does take, it takes that intestinal fortitude to get it done. So in Salesforce's case, we remained focused on it. We had this incredible opportunity as our company was pivoting from being a first-party data center model where everything on Salesforce was operated and run out of our own data centers. And we realized that for us to move into the markets we wanted to move to globally, we needed to move to public cloud. And at that moment in time was the inflection for us to take the journey to really expand what we're doing with DoD and enter the intelligence community and go into air gap. It was very, very different for us, but from a corporate perspective, if the leadership is engaged, the senior leadership of the company is engaged, you're going to get it done. You just got to see it through.
And so why, Bill, with these obstacles, I think for Bill and Aaron, then Ivan, I'll get to you. So given these obstacles and given all the other things that both your companies could be doing, why are you spending time in the defense area? Is it the mission? Is it your personal histories, which are very interesting? Is it just a pure economic case that there's a TAM that despite all the friction it's worth going into? Like, how do you make the case to your bosses why you're here?
I mean, it's all of the above. You just said it, right? Yes, the government spends a lot of money and there's a large TAM, but we're an American company. It matters. We're here for the mission. There's a number of us from Google Public Sector who come out of the government. We believe deeply in what's happening. So it makes economic sense and it makes sense for the country. It's a must do.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. That's exactly right. As an American company, Salesforce is dedicated to ensuring that our government has the greatest technology available to them at all times.
So Ivan, I guess taking that same question to you is, so Cohere and what you're doing with AI, again, anyone who's halfway awake knows how hot and the huge opportunities you have in the enterprise. With all the growth that you could be doing at the scale of the company, why here? Why defense? Why now?
So how we've approached going to market is identifying industries where there's a high level of competition, right? We see the most adoption when companies identify an adversary or a competitor already adopting AI. And for us in the public sector, that is the case, right? We were actually approached by public sector first, who wanted to adopt our capabilities into the air gaps because they know that, our adversaries are already doing this. They're already using these capabilities in the most, harsh conditions. So for us, there was a huge demand for this capability because it's a highly competitive field. Adversaries are already using this technology. And so we saw an opportunity to sell to a customer base that are highly motivated to adopt the technology. This isn't the case for every department in public sector, of course, or even in commercial sector. But AI is a transformative technology. This is how you compete in some of these fields.
And so could you, just give us an example of what are some of the use cases of AI within this space as we should be thinking about? And what are the types of things Cohere is doing or that you want to be doing in service of the warfighter?
So obviously AI is a dual use technology. The best, most abstract way I can put it is your business has a ton of sensors and they're collecting data from all sorts of places, and you don't have enough humans to actually spot signals within all of this raw traffic or data or wherever it is. On the commercial side, this may be web searches, social media, even your Salesforce database, right? But in the public sector, it's stuff like, hey, you have all sorts of sensors on your destroyers, right? The captain or the crew doesn't have enough time, or maybe even the capability to analyze and diagnose what's happening on the equipment. So really, AI is this really powerful technology, especially with LLMs, where you can give it all of your sensor data, and it can pay attention to what is actually important that you should pay attention to as the human operator.
And why, maybe this is a basic question, from what you've done working with American national security agencies so far, how does the American warfighter compare and our ability to use and leverage AI compared to our allies or even our adversaries, if you're aware?
So I think there's layers of friction, like Aaron said. The number one problem, I'd say, is just getting technology into the system, so procurement. We've seen some governments even invent new procurement vehicles to get highly innovative technology into the system, so we don't have these 7-year cycles like you mentioned. But once the system's in, for AI to be useful, you need to make available the context of your business to the models, right? And what this practically means is, you have the AI in the air gapped. Can it actually get the signals it needs to do its job, right? Do you have the networking infrastructure, the shared compute infrastructure, something like Second Front, right? Where you can safely connect all of the tools and context it needs to serve the human operator behind the screen, right? And so there's a bit of data readiness problem that I see across organizations, right? Like they just don't have, maybe some of their sensors are completely disconnected. Maybe some of the information that the AI needs to do its job is not even digital, right? Like they're in file cabinets or something like that. So some form of data centralization, data engineering, I'd say that is prerequisite work for AI adoption to succeed in the organization.
So, Ivan, you made a critical point. It's getting the data ready in the hands of those who can really use it. Aaron, as we're just kind of level setting what the offerings are, can you tell us, for those who are sort of not as familiar with Google public sector does, what are the offerings that you're interested in providing in service to the community we have here?
Yeah, I mean, I'll go back to your initial statement of dual use. I mean, that is exactly what Google is driving to. Google is the epitome of that within the public sector space. So we actually accredit our commercial products. So the entire Google commercial cloud platform is accredited at FedRAMP High, IL5. We make all of those capabilities available. We do not have a separate environment, a GovCloud. There's no lag. There's no separate code base. So we are the epitome of dual use. And so when you think about everything that Google does, whether it's the world's most massive compute platform, or it's the most advanced AI, Gemini models, et cetera, Vertex, Agent Space, we accredit that directly for use by the government. And that's a different approach, but it's one that I think where we sit today is super topical to the conversation.
So what is good enough for the private sector, the small business, the large enterprise is good enough for the Pentagon as well, which is very different from the non-apocryphal story. When I was at the Pentagon, and I see Josh and some other colleagues, former colleagues here who knew this, when we went to Apple, not us, thankfully, and asked them to design an iPhone for the Pentagon, some people thought this was like an actually normal question to ask. You're trying to deliver what is basically terrific technology and just bring it into a critical part for industry.
We have to do work. We have to enforce certain things that are a requirement from the government, like data residency, right? We need to store the government's data in the continental US, and we can do that. We have to enforce US persons controls for areas where the government data is stored. But to your point, we are not designing from the ground up a bespoke GovCloud according to some JROC specification exercise that took 5 years to do.
Right. And Bill, by the same thing, what is the offering that Salesforce is trying to provide into national security.
Yeah, so like what Aaron just said with Google, Salesforce took the approach of not forking our code. So we have one code base. Just like Salesforce across the world, every customer is running the same version. There's one version of Salesforce everywhere. We do call it GovCloud, so the compliance fabrics or frameworks that apply to the different agencies or the federal government. There's slightly different flavors of those compliance frameworks. So we roll those out so that our customers, when they order SKUs, they're ordering the right SKU for the framework that they need, but it's the same code set. Our customers across all of government are using what our commercial customers use. Government is large enterprise. They have traditional back offices for personnel management or financial logistics operations, and then more of the in the military, you get into operations in the field and whatnot, and we see that too with our commercial customers. And so we bring these capabilities in. We make sure that they're compliant with the particular risk management framework that our customers need, and we maintain those accreditations. And our customers get that same experience that the commercial customers get, the 3 updates a year, and that constant flow of innovation.
So, Bill, when you talk about, it's a really key point, like giving the customer who are dealing with the same great customer experience elsewhere. When I think about what you're doing, Salesforce doesn't exactly scream warfighter to me, probably because you have a really great marketing department, and if it did, it would be very awkward for a lot of reasons. What does it make, when you're talking to the customers here, what does it take to make Salesforce feel mission critical in a combat environment?
Yeah, so when we first started in the government in 2005-ish, the company was about 5 years old. The experience back then was similar to what you just said. Most people in the government didn't know Salesforce. I came in about 11 years ago, and pretty much everybody knows Salesforce. It's a well-known brand, and our government customers, while they may not have experienced it inside in their operations, in their outside world, they did experience it. Maybe they have a spouse that is running a company that, or working in a company that's running Salesforce, or they're in an NGO that's running Salesforce. And so when we come in and we discuss the business, the flow of work that our customers need, it's very easy to show how that flow can work in Salesforce. And that's how we do it. So we understand the customer's business, we speak their language, and we show them how that work can get done in Salesforce. At the end of the day, it's a CRM platform, customer relationship management. We move into the intelligence space, especially human intelligence. Human intelligence is connecting people with people, and that's what CRM is all about. It's right down the middle for what Salesforce is. So as soon as we are inside with our customers, having the conversations about the work that they need to accomplish, they see it. And with the low-code, no-code platform that we are, they're able to execute blazingly fast.
So the part you talked about trust, which is really a critical piece, and I've been continuing on that theme. Trust and credibility in AI is important, but also not very understood. And so given that in defense, credibility isn't measured really by GitHub stars. It's something else. So given the lack of information, or not lack of information, the lack of understanding amongst many people in and out of uniform about what AI does and understanding these, how are you building trust between the end users in the Pentagon, given this technology and how LLMs and these functions are sort of poorly understood even by a number of those who are creating it?
Yeah, I mean, we had to, convince signals intelligence people to trust our technology, and I still have the scars to, show you to prove it. But it's multiple levels, right? Like first, we had to convince the technology people that, hey, this is a system you can actually deploy into your air-gapped, and this is how it works. These are the data sets that went into training these models. And obviously all the cyber scans over the containers and stuff like that. But then also working with the policy folks to help them understand, okay, what are the risks with this technology? What are the ways these things could go wrong in the field? And so for us, it's about transparency around how the technology is built, where the risks are, so that our customers can decide what their risk tolerance is and how they want to deploy this capability into the field.
And when you're dealing with that risk, what are your customers caring about most? Are they trying to understand, hey, I need to understand how this model actually works? Do they want to know that? Or they're just saying, I just want to make sure it doesn't blow up a live op and do something really crazy?
Yeah, for the engineers, they're all about control, right? They need to know that all the telemetry, all the actions that the agents are taking within their environment are logged and can be audited, right? They could control exactly how downstream systems are affected, right? Because they built these legacy systems for humans. Now that the AIs are using it, well, all of a sudden you have 100x, maybe even 1,000x more load than before. And so having a system you can fully control and monitor what is exactly happening at every step is vastly important. And then going to the application side for the business users, they want to see exactly what the AI is doing, right? The reasoning chains, the actual tools it's using, how it's using these tools, and even when it's producing its answer, where they got the answer from. And these are things that we build into our models. Like our models precisely cite at a sentence level, hey, this tool gave me this result. This is why I wrote the answer like this. So it's like layers of things to actually build trust with an organization. But it's if we're having these models make life or death decisions, this is the lowest bar to clear, right? You can trust our technology and understand how it works.
And then, and with this uncertainty, I mean, all of us around this room have had this experience where you ask a question into whatever your LLM, I think not using what your company has done. I mean, recently I was preparing for something and we were talking about autonomous warfare, and I was very confidently told by my trusty $20 a month agent that that drone pilots suffer 4 times the rate of PTSD as pilots who go into combat. And then I asked for the citation for it, and that's a totally bogus statistic. It was like, it's not true. So hallucinations are problems in a lot of reasons, but when you have hallucinations in these environments, the costs are obviously harder, especially you have someone who's downrange, an enlisted guy who's looking for this. So given the costs are so much higher of that, how do you address that and mitigate that in what you're doing when you're selling into this community?
So like I said, the first step is to actually have the AI present its plan, what it's about to do, and what happened while it was doing it, right? An audit trail of how it came to make those decisions. In some ways, that's actually more advantageous than working with humans, right? We don't write down every single thought that we have. So first it's that, but then the second is education. We need to teach the operators to maybe not trust the first answer that coming out of these things, right? Do a bit more due diligence. Now that you can generate a report 10 times faster, maybe generate 2 times the amount of reports just to see if the information is consistent, just to see if you can get a consistent perspective out of the agents. Because sometimes it is subjective, right? Like depending on what the sensors say, maybe there's not a true one answer, and you do need and to the human, you need to present this multi-perspective take over what signals are actually happening. So it's a bit of what you actually show the human operator, but also educating them to say, hey, don't just take the first answer. Now they could do work more. Actually, just do your due diligence.
That's very helpful. I want to shift tracks to talk about a new topic. Before I do, everyone knows you have the ability to ask questions as we are. Please send questions you want to have asked to our panelists, and as we lead into the last part of the session, we'll be sure to ask them. Aaron, I want to take you back to your previous job when you were CIO of the Navy, a job that has not probably been there all that long, or probably in the scale that you had it. When you were in that role, what was the tech pitch that you wish someone would have brought to you, but you never saw it?
Yeah. So yeah, the role was there, and then it went away, and then they asked me to bring it back. So it's a moving target. The tech pitch that I wish I had gotten, and it's funny you ask, is I had been asked for years for a tactical edge deployable cloud, right? That could function disconnected, that could solve for the DDIL mission, that could host AI, they could do all of these things. Everybody wanted it. I would go to Pac Fleet, I would go to Indo-PACOM. Everybody wants this. Cloud in a box on a pad in Guam or whatever. And we didn't have a way to solve for that. And we had a lot of smart people out at Camp Pendleton spend years trying to make that work. I got to Google, and like the first week they're giving me the in-brief, and this team comes in and says, hey, we want to talk to you about this product we have. And they briefed me on the whole product, and I got mad. I remember I was mad. And they stopped the briefing, and they said, hey, what's wrong? Why are you so mad? I'm like, where the hell was this for the last 3 years, right? I mean, this is exactly what we were looking for. So that is the pitch that I wish I had gotten. I think what we're seeing, though, is the market wasn't at the level of maturity that was required. So, I think industry has read the signals. They've read that evolving requirement set. And you're seeing now, not just Google, but other providers who are beginning to offer that. And that is, and by the way, that's not a bespoke tactical edge cloud for the government. And when you look at it and you look at the technology that Google does that on, we use that same baseline air-gapped tactical edge technology to deliver services for financial industries and for telecommunications who value that security and others. So again, it's back to your dual use, but it is really getting to this is the thing at the pointy end that people were looking for.
So Bill, now that you're on the other side, what is the in the enterprise, what's the most common way that vendors shoot themselves in the foot when they're trying to sell the government? There are a lot of folks here who are trying to do that. Everyone's well-intentioned, mission-focused. Either when you were at the Navy or what you see now, what are you like, these guys are just screwing it up?
Yeah, so I think when you're first getting started and bringing commercial tech into the government, it looks a lot bigger. It is big. The scale of of being able to sell the product, it's massive. And you get the big dollar signs in your eyes, and I think that kind of skews the process. And I think that's the first thing that kind of gets a sales team off the rails a bit. Understanding the acquisition process is really important. Understanding the ATO process is also important. Getting the tech in, you might get the quick win, but then it's got to go through an authorization before you can actually scale it up. So I think having that understanding up front is great before you put it into your CRM and start reporting up that you got that big deal and you're going to close that massive enterprise license. Just understand the process completely.
Well, as we move toward what can be changed in the process. So there's been a huge amount of DoD innovation initiatives, a lot more than when I was in the building. Some work well, some sort of not so much. Asking for all three of you guys, what are the top DoD innovations that are actually moving the needle? If you could name like one, and then if you're comfortable saying it in a on-the-rec environment, what are the ones that sound great but really aren't making a difference in what you're trying to do?
Well, I'll start. I think the hyperscalers are incredibly important. In our case, we went to market first with AWS. Google wasn't there at the time, but they've been a great partner. And without the infrastructure as a service providers and doing the work that they are doing, what you're doing today, cloud service providers like Salesforce wouldn't be able to bring their products to market. So really, my hat's off to the IC and seeing the vision for that, opening the door for AWS, and now Google and Microsoft to do what they're doing. That technology has been hugely important for so many others like us to come.
Ivan?
Yeah, I'll add that we service public sector internationally, and so we've seen all sorts of capabilities and level of maturity. I will say that having a Gov Cloud is really convenient for delivering software and even getting the resources to scale the deployment of these models. So yeah, hugely appreciate serving this market in particular because of the cloud environment and having that on the high side as well.
So, Aaron?
Yeah, I think something that's working well from a DoD perspective, they are beginning to pivot to commercial technology, and you see it in the attention and the investment in things like Defense Innovation Unit. So they've embraced that sort of commercial thinking about it as an incubator. They're using that to drive forward the conversation around autonomy in a way that, if they DoD'd the crap out of it like in the past, that would be 15 years to do autonomy. And I think by going to commercial industry, driving through things like DIU and other incubator organizations, they're moving much, much faster. So I give them a lot of credit, for that pivot, and that's been really, really critical.
So a question that we just got from the audience, it was directed towards you, Aaron, but I think it could be for any three of you. It's one that I've worried about is, in 2025, do we still need separate NIPR, SIPR, JWICS, SAP networks? And why? And then, can America produce enough GPUs to meet the network needs across each network? And even if we can we do it? Can the government afford doing that?
So that question attacks an entire religious belief structure within the DoD. And I have been in many meetings out at Fort Meade having this discussion, and there's a group of people within the DoD who are enlightened, and there's a flat earth society in the DoD who will never be able to see past those three network names.
Some people just like having 3 computers on their desks for whatever reason.
But the short answer is yes, we do not need 3 separate networks. We have the technology between zero trust, data-centric security, encryption, post-quantum encryption to secure the government's data without 3 separate physical wires. But we have to bring the government to that point through a process, and we're going to do that.
So if we fast forward to the Offset Symposium 10 years from now, what should the network landscape look like if they get religion attacked? Do we have one network in different ways? We don't have JWICS and SIPR and NIPR all together. Like, what should we be driving towards that is a little more sensical?
A network based on commercial capability that fully leverages data-centric security enforced through zero trust, right? Do you trust the person? Do you trust the app? Do you trust the device? Do you trust the network? Do you trust the data? That is the world that we are moving to, and I think the question is, how rapidly can the DoD embrace it? To their credit, there's a host of enlightened individuals and leaders across the DoD who see it. I think the challenge is, how can we do that and overcome all that friction that I led off with, which tends to slow things down?
I want to move into a bit of a lightning round as we sort of wrap up. So for each of you guys, if you became SecDef or the deputy tomorrow, what are the top 2 things you would do? Bill, I'll start with you.
Yeah. I'd solve the personnel security clearance process. It still takes way too long to get people cleared. And then when they are cleared, moving personnel from one agency to another and the crossover, it's a mess. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is, until we get to one network, that we get reciprocity. So once it's accredited one place, that it can be used elsewhere.
Yeah, I've got one thing, and that's to drastically increase the compute footprint on the high side. I think that's probably the #1 bottleneck for a lot of these, mission critical use cases, is actually training and tuning these models with classified data And you just can't do that today because there's not enough high side compute.
And just to push on that, so what do we need to do to fix that? Because I feel like there's a huge amount of debates about chips. There's a huge amount of debates about servers, about this in sort of a theoretical way. But based on what you've seen, you're at the heart of that. What do we actually need to do to make that computing power available on the high side?
So one, it's to produce the chips, but then the process of actually, clearing these data centers, we need to do a much better job of that, make that faster, and just like build these giant data centers that are for high-class use cases.
If we could do one thing from that perspective, I tear down the church of accreditation and tear down the church of ATO and replace it with a continuous monitoring regime based on outcomes instead of the current approach, which is hundreds of controls documented once every 3 years. You do 10,000 push-ups and we'll give you an ATO. That's not security. Compliance is not security, and we have to move to a different footing.
So we've been talking about the familiar punching bag, about what the government gets wrong. We could have many, many hours of panels talking about that. Let me flip it to the other side. What's the one myth that Silicon Valley still believes about working with the Pentagon? Or what's the biggest thing that Silicon Valley still gets wrong about coming to Washington trying to work with folks here?
I'll say first, I think one of the biggest myths, there are several, but one of the biggest is that the Pentagon cannot move rapidly. And we saw it in COVID. I mean, the Pentagon moved extremely rapidly to deploy capability. The Navy deployed 550,000 seats of cloud in 12 months. When pre-COVID, when we asked the program office how long that would take, they said it will take 5 years. And moved from funding to implementation to deployment in 12 months to accomplish that. So they can move fast if we can just allow them to do it.
No, on that point, I think one of the myths that I feel myself that people will get is the Pentagon actually has two speeds. You have the moving very fast speed. I mean, I was involved in the planning of the Bin Laden operation, and we can keep secrets and we can get things done lightning fast. So that speed exists. Unfortunately, there's that speed and there's everything else, which is very sort of bimodal. I mean, for where you sit as a founder in particular, what is Silicon Valley, or not necessarily Silicon Valley, but the tech community still get wrong about working with these guys?
Yeah, I mean, just thinking about my peers, just the fact that they could avoid working in this space. I think our adversaries work very closely with their private sector, and they're able to innovate, unhindered because of that. It is foolish for startups to think and technology companies to think that we can enjoy all the security to actually build our businesses and innovate without actually strengthening and hardening our national security posture. That is not how we'll win against our adversaries. Yeah.
No panel in Washington is complete without talking about Signalgate. A question that comes out from the audience is, reflecting on this, when will we see the government move to a secure Slack? Or, given what we saw, what's the answer to having the difficulty in both not having really good secure communication devices and not being able to talk about some of these things? So again, we saw the problem, and we all know things are so difficult to do with the high side and so inconvenient. You're kind of driving people to use technology in a way that probably wasn't. So given that, what's the solution?
I don't know about the solution, but the perspective on Signalgate is that's a living requirements document. As a recovering CIO, when you see people go around you and you see shadow IT, that is people working around your barriers. And so the use of Signal is a reflection of the fact that the current solutions don't solve the need. And maybe we need to go back to your conversation that you led off with, dual use technology, embracing commercial capability, but that Signal event ought to be viewed as a living requirements document.
Well played, or well put. So as we wrap up, the last question as we hand up, what is keeping you up at night most? Ivan?
Like I said a few minutes ago, our adversaries are just working tightly with their private sector. They're able to beat the innovations of an economic engine and, build up their capabilities. We need to get better at that.
Bill?
Well, last night it was the red eye that I took to get here. But overall, it's just working with the customer, making sure that we are always delivering on time with their expectation, delivering the capabilities that they need as fast as we can get it to them.
Urgency of the mission. I mean, everything we've talked about, at the end of all of it is getting capability to the mission and how can we solve for it and all that friction. But it is the urgency of the mission.
Well, look, as we wrap up, this has been a fascinating discussion. I know there are three things I'm taking away, which I've learned here. I think first, there is an enormous amount of great commercial technology that doesn't need to be invented, that is dual use, and we need to continue to ease the way to get into the hands of those who are dealing with our adversaries. Second, progress has been made in some ways, but the number of procurement, other things jumping in remain very significant. But then third, as we're all sitting here and true, there's more attention, the urgency is as high as ever. And if we don't start working on this now, the enemy has a vote, and the enemy is not taking a nap and is doing something. Again, I want to thank the Second Front team for doing so much to advance this mission. Thank you so much to a great group of panelists in the discussion, and great to have you here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.